Hey friends, in the previous part we talked about what is SvelteKit and explained the SvelteKit project structure from scratch, but things are about to get real. In this one we're going to learn everything about SvelteKit routing. If you're just starting learning SvelteKit and want to follow along, you're going to need Node.js, and I recommend using VS Code as the editor and using the Svelte VS Code extension. So you're going to go to the Node.js, download it. This is going to get npm for you if you're new to this, so you're going to be able to install packages. And I also highly encourage you, despite me in the post using npm because it's standard, I personally going to use pnpm. Please get pnpm, save your hard drive, because pnpm lets you reuse packages. So for example, when you start a new project, you're not going to install the same packages all over again, which is really going to destroy your hard drive. And pnpm is way faster because of this, so it just uses links to packages for every project, so it's really super fast and it's really easy to set up. So I highly encourage you to look into that. So you're going to need VS Code for the editor, but you can use whatever you want. Of course, you're going to need to set up the Svelte syntax highlighting yourself. So you're going to need this extension, Svelte for VS Code. Just grab this and you're going to be fine. So for example, if I press Ctrl-Shift-X, I'm going to get to my extensions. And now I can type in Svelte and I should get the extension. So here it is, Svelte for VS Code. You should install this and you should be good. So let me just close this. And here I just have a regular SvelteKit project. You already know how to do this. You can scaffold this. Really, it's not important what you select because you're going to be mostly talking about routing, but I'm going to use TypeScript. But TypeScript is really optional. And if you're afraid of TypeScript, you can just ignore it. So for example, people really think that TypeScript is a spooky thing. But for example, if you just see something like, let's say, variable, and you see something with a colon, number, if you're not familiar with TypeScript, you can just basically just ignore the type, remove it, right? And that's going to be valid JavaScript. So let me just close this. Another thing I'm going to set up is some styling, so I don't ruin my eyes. So I'm going to use Pico CSS. They're just going to give us some nice default styles. So I'm going to go to get started. I'm really going to use a CDN because I don't want to install anything right now. I'm just going to copy this over, Control-P in your editor VS Code, open app.html, and here before the head ends, we're just going to paste this in, and I'm already started the development server with pnpm run dev. So if I go to localhost here, if I refresh it, it's already updated. So you can see Pico is in action here, which has some really nice default styles for us. Another thing you can do is use TagBlitz if you want to follow along and using something like a tablet or whatever where you really don't have access to all of this. You can just go to SvelteKit.new. This is just going to open a new TagBlitz project, and this honestly blows my mind because this uses Node.js in the browser and it feels even faster than your local development. But yeah, you're just going to set this up. You might have to enable cookies because TagBlitz is some special secret sauce behind the scenes that uses web containers, which is really fascinating. But yeah, you can do that. As you see in Brave, it tells me to enable web containers. So basically, I just have to go here and I can put down the shield or I can enable the cookies. So let me just go here and I'm going to say allow all cookies for this site, and it should now work. You're just going to restart. But yeah, this is a common problem with TagBlitz when it's embedded for code example in some other sites because it really needs you to access cookies. But basically this is it. You get a SvelteKit app super fast and that's it. So let's talk about pages in SvelteKit. SvelteKit uses file-based routing where routes of your app are defined by the directories in your project. So for example, here is this URL and all of these parts are URL segments. So example.com, this slash is going to map to routes, which has a page.svelte file. So this is going to be your home. And then if you want to go, for example, to posts, you have a post directory, which has another plus page.svelte file. As you can see, these routes are defined inside a source/routes folder. Each directory inside the routes folder can have one or more files using the plus prefix. To define a page in SvelteKit, you use a plus page.svelte file, which becomes a route that maps to a URL. So let's create a default route. I'm going to open the sidebar here. I'm going to go to the source routes folder. Here we already have a plus page.svelte file that comes default when you scaffold the project. I'm going to close the sidebar. So let's just make some navigation. So I can say nav, autocomplete. This is just emmet in your editor. You can press tab to complete it. So let me just create a link. This is going to be our home. So I can just say home and I'm just going to copy it over. And we're going to have posts. So I'm going to say post here. I'm going to save it and I'm going to go here, and you can see we already have this navigation that's home. It's really important to understand the mental model of what a page is in SvelteKit, because the page component gets rendered twice, once on the server for the initial request and once on the client because of hydration, which is just a fancy word that means adding JavaScript for interactivity to the page after the server returns their HTML document. Before I show you what I'm talking about, let's just give it a H1, so we can just say home page. And I'm just going to add a script here. This is just a quick snippet I have, so we can just add a script. And here we're going to console log out hello. So I'm going to say CL, which is another snippet I have. So we can just say hello. Alright, so now pay attention. I'm going to open the terminal. So control dot is a shortcut for me, but might be something else for you, or you can use the menu in VS Code. And I'm also going to open the console here, and let me just adjust it. So now I'm going to save this, and first you're going to notice hello in the console here, which is on the client, and you're like maybe thinking, okay, but where it is on the server, and because the client-side router already kicked in, but for example, let's say I'm the user, I'm visiting the page for the first time, so when I refresh, this page is going to run on the server and on the client. So let's see this in action. I'm going to refresh, now we see hello on the server, inside the terminal, and in your browser. I want you to understand what a page is and that it matches your mental model, because it's going to save you a lot of trouble in the future. A page itself is just a Svelte component, which you can see for yourself if you press Ctrl-Shift-I to open the developer tools and navigate to the network tab and look at the response for the page. So here we're already inside developer tools, so we can go to the network tab, and if we scroll up top, we can see if we, let me just clear everything, also make sure you disable cache. So you can see here is the document that server-side render from the server. If you go to the preview, here is actually the entire HTML document, but where is our page component? So here is just a lot of junk for development you can ignore, but here at the bottom is somewhere our page, so we can find it quickly. Go here it is somewhere, let me just scroll to the bottom. So here it is somewhere. Yeah, so this is it. So basically, this might look weird to you because it doesn't look anything like Svelte, well, at least the one you know about, because this is what it means that Svelte is a disappearing framework, because SvelteKit at the end of the day compiles to JavaScript, so it doesn't even have to ship some runtime. Of course, there is some runtime because at the end of the day, if you look here, Svelte turns your component into a class page, extends Svelte component, so this is your component, you really don't have to understand this, I just want to show you how this works. And basically here is some magic with hydration and etc. You really don't have to concern yourself about, but it's really useful to know about. So remember, a page is just a component in SvelteKit. So let me just close this, and I also want to show you that if you look at the response of the page here, we can actually go to the page source. So here is actually your HTML generated. You can see here is the script that's really responsible for hydration and loading the client-side router, and enables client-side rendering once the page is loaded. Alright, but enough of this, let me just close this. And I'm also going to close the terminal for now. Here just complaining about the favicon, which you can ignore. But yeah, let me just close the terminal and let's create another route. And let me just do one quick thing. So I'm going to go to prettier and I'm going to disable semicolons because I prefer no semicolons. So I can just close that and let me just save it. And this should auto format everything, and awesome, everything works. So I'm going to open the sidebar in our routes. I'm going to press new file, which is a neat trick in VS Code. So we can start creating a folder that's named post. We can say slash, and then we can say page plus Svelte. And now we can just go here, we can copy what we already have. We don't even need this right now. Let me just remove this. We can just copy this entire part. We can go here, and instead of home page, we can just say post page. So here is our home and post, and it looks weird because of Pico. So what I have to do in this navigation, I'm going to create a UL. I'm going to say li. I'm going to place it like this. Let me just select all of this. I'm going to create another one. Let me just do this. I'm going to save it, and now this should be working. So you can see if you go to home and posts, everything should work great. And let me just copy over this to posts. Yeah, so everything should work great. Awesome. So you might be wondering, what is the reason behind this weird plus symbol? And basically, it's just so SvelteKit knows that this is a specific file to a route. So what this enables you to do is collocate code. So for example, if you had a post component, for example, or some utility here, you can just create a normal file here instead of having to use some weird names like underscore and etc. because SvelteKit is going to ignore everything that's not a route. Yeah, so let me just close the sidebar. I mentioned how pages are just components, and just like regular components, they're mounted and destroyed on navigation. So let's see if that is true. So I'm going to go to the home page and I'm going to add back the script. I'm going to use the onMount and onDestroy methods. I'm going to say onMount, and this should auto import it for me if I press it like this. So here I'm going to give it a callback. I'm going to say console log. I'm going to say mounted home page, and then I'm going to say on destroy. I'm going to give it also a callback, console log unmounted home page. I'm going to save this, and let me just copy this over. So I can go here to posts. I'm going to copy this, and now we can just say mounted posts. So I can press Ctrl D to select what's similar, mounted and unmounted post page. Alright, so here we're going to go first to the console. Let me just clear everything here. And now I'm the user, first time opening the page. So let me just do this. So we can see it says mounted home page. And now when we go to the post page, it should say that it unmounted the home page and mounted the post page. Awesome. So it says unmounted home page, mounted post page. The same is true when you go back. Because your pages are just components, this also means that page transitions are really simple in SvelteKit, which is a topic for another time. But I also want to notice how the only thing that loads when navigating between the pages is the data for the page, because it's using client-side rendering, but if you refresh the page, it's going to use server-side rendering. So let me just show you what I mean. If I go to the network tab, I'm going to clear everything again, and let me just refresh. So this is the first time when you visit the page, right? So you're going to see that you get the entire document here. So you can see here is everything you need. But let me just clear everything, and I'm going to show you something awesome. So the first thing, notice the data preloading when I'm going to hover over posts, and it didn't load any HTML document, right, or did server-side rendering, at least behind the scenes. But for example, you can see it just loaded the component that it requires. So you can see this looks very familiar, and that's basically it. But you can see here, if we, for example, again do a hard refresh, so we're visiting the post page for the first time, it's going to load everything. Let me just clear this. I'm going to load everything. You can see now you have a document here which has everything again. And if I clear this and again going to home, it's just going to load what it requires. And don't forget to enable disable caching if you're doing this, so you're going to get consistent results. But yeah, basically this is how this works. And you might be wondering, is the data preloading some magic that SvelteKit does? And the answer is yes, it's some magic. But because SvelteKit knows the data required for your routes, it can load the CSS and JavaScript in advance. And this is thanks to, if I press Ctrl P and go to app HTML, you can see this attribute on the body that's data, SvelteKit preload data on hover. So when you hover over a link, it's going to start prefetching or preloading the data for the next page. So I kind of want to show you how this is awesome. If I go, for example, I'll go here and let me just create some styles. Let me just say H1 color aqua, and you won't see this in development, but let's stop the development server. I can say npm run build, and I'm also going to run preview. So basically this is emulating like you're in production. All right, so let's build everything. This is going to take 1 second. Now the URL is different. It's going to be 4173. So let's go to the home page. So pay attention what happens now. How awesome is this? When we go to post, it's going to load the CSS and the JavaScript required for the page. Amazing. So you can see here is the CSS alone, which is scoped to this component. And here is just the JavaScript, which is probably, oh, it's not even minified. Interesting. Oh, this is because I have this pretty print. But when you remove this, it's minified. So yeah, you get the smallest bundle size. But how awesome is this? And another thing worth mentioning is that you can set preloading for the entire page like it is set in the app.html file. But you can also set it for individual links and override it if you want. Alright, so that was a brief and interesting tangent, and I'm back here in development mode. So let's talk about layouts. Our two pages, if you notice, share the same navigation. And we could create a navigation component and then we can reuse it. So you might be familiar with this from other frameworks. We can probably make something like navigation, and then we can import navigation from whatever, right? But really, in SvelteKit, this is solved using layouts. So first I'm going to remove these styles because we don't need them. And let's take the repeating styles. I'm also going to remove the script block. And let's just take this. We're just going to cut it. Let's just save this. in our post, we're going to go to home. I'm also going to remove everything here. So how do you create a route layout? You create a route layout by going to source, routes, and then you can say new file, and you can create layout plus svelte. Now we can just copy the navigation over, and we should see the navigation is here and everything works, but where's the content? And you need to do another thing, which is pass a slot. So you can do it like this, you can save, and now you can see the home page and the post page. And this is also a great spot to include your global style. So for example, if I go to source, and I can just create app CSS, I should just close it quickly. So we can create some global styles. We can say body, let's give it some padding. And then I'm going to say for the title, I want the line height to be 1. And then I can say text transform, capitalize. Let me just save it. I'm going to close this file, and now inside our layout, let me just move it here. We can go to the top, we can create a script block, and now we can say import. So we just have to go one folder above, and we can say app CSS. And now when you save it, you should see that things are going to get updated. Awesome. And just like your pages, the layout is going to run on the server and client. But first, let me explain to you what a slot is. And basically, if you're not familiar, this isn't something SvelteKit specific, but this comes from Svelte, which is a slot property which lets you pass anything you want. So here I have an example of that. Let me just go here. So here you can pretend this is our page. So this is the route layout. Here we have our navigation. We can obviously move the slot wherever we want. And that's basically how that works. So basically everything that you pass here is going to be shown. So in Remix, this is outlets. And I don't know what it is in other frameworks, but basically that's how it works. So you can include repeating content here like navigation, a sidebar, or a footer, and it's going to be repeated for every child route. So for example, if we have a post routes, here is the route layout. So if you create a slash post, now we have a sidebar here and post, and basically this is going to be the slot that's just going to show the other content. So basically how this works behind the scenes in SvelteKit, let's say for example we have our home page. Remember, our page is just a component. So when you add something like a layout, a new slot, it's basically equivalent to something like this, right? So basically this is what it does. And now we can just indent it, and basically that's how this works. So everything else is going to get passed. As I said, a slot lets other content through, and as you navigate to a route, it mounts the component for the page and unmounts the old component. So one component is just going to be active for the route you're on. So for example, if you go to the post page, this is not going to be active, it's just going to show the post page, right? Another interesting thing is that if there's an error, it's just going to render the error for that page and nothing else. So if you really want to see how the secret sauce works, let me just exit this component. So in your .SvelteKit folder, this might look intimidating, but don't worry about it. So let me just see, I think it's in the generated. We can see here is the root.svelte file for the pages. So it really has some interesting things here that are foreshadowing. But we can see here how it kind of works, and you don't really have to understand. So basically this is exactly what I've shown you. So if it's just a single component without a layout, then it's just going to render out the component. But if it has a layout, then it's just going to use the layout, and then it's just going to render your component. And if there's an error, it's going to show the error component instead. And basically that's how that works. So this is really fascinating, but you're going to learn even more about layouts. So I'm just going to close this. And let's talk about the power of nested routes. You can nest layouts as much as you want. So let's say, for example, I want a slash post. So if I go here, I'm already at slash post. But for example, I really want this kind of route where I have slash post and slug. So how I have it here, if I go to slash post, and this is another beautiful aspect of file-based routing, because this is going to match the URL where your other content is. So we're on post, and this is going to be our new layout, which you can create a nested layout for. So we're going to have a sidebar post, and when I click on a post, it's going to load the post on the right side. And if I go here, this works by this. So we're going to go to posts, and we're going to go to the slug, and this is going to show the post here. But the true power of nested layouts or routing is, we already mentioned how SvelteKit knows what data to load for the page, which is awesome. But another great aspect is that, let's say, for example, something goes wrong here when we load the post. Instead of taking our entire app down, only this part is going to crash, and you're going to get a useful error message and know where to look to fix the problem. So let's have a look how that works. So I'm going to go back here, and let me just close all of these files. We're not going to need this. And now, just collapse everything. I'm going to go to source, routes, post, inside our post. So this is the post page. And let me just give some text here. So you can say you can, and let me just give a link. So let's say, for example, that we want the user to create a post. So we can say plus create. You can create or edit your post here. So basically this is what we want to do. And now you need to create a layout. So we always have this sidebar here. And when we click on a post, it's going to load it here. And we already have a nested layout, so our navigation isn't going anywhere, right? And how awesome is that? So I can create another plus layout.svelte file inside source, routes, posts, plus layout.svelte. So let's do that. I'm going to go here. So here where our posts are, we can say new file plus layout.svelte. Now I'm going to close the sidebar. And now let's add quickly some markup. So I can say posts using Emmet, really simple. Now I'm going to create an aside. I'm going to give it a h4. I'm going to say posts. And now I'm going to hard code some posts. So I can say nav. Let's give it a list. You can say li. Let's give it a link. So we can say posts1. Do it like that. And I'm just going to select this li, Control Alt for me, and arrow down is going to just copy over the code in VS Code. So I'm going to say 2. So right now nothing is dynamic here, but we're going to see how that works later. So we can just say 2. And now remember, we need to include a slot, because if we just save this, we can see our post is here. Say 1, 2, and it's not found because we need to do something which we're going to do in a second. So this is 1, 2. And remember how to include the slot. We can just say main, and let's just include a slot. So now we can see our post page create, and let's add some quick styles. So now we can go here, I can say style, posts, let's say display grid. I'm going to give it a gap of 2 rem, let's say grid, template column. So I really want the column to be 200 pixels, and then the post to be 60 characters wide, but you can set it to whatever you want. And let's just give it some margin, top, we can say 2 rem. I'm going to save this, and now we should move this main, so it's part of our grid. So we're going to get this layout. And how awesome is this? Also, this is hard to see. Let me just zoom in a bit. I'm going to do it like this. Let me just see. Yeah, let's just zoom in like this. So remember how I showed you here this slug? So when I go here and I go to post 1, we somehow need to load this post. And we can do this using a parameter, so this can be dynamic like a variable, and this is how we can get the post or whatever we want. So we can create a child routes for posts that's going to be named /post/create, or we can even make something like post edit, and it will inherit the root layout and the post layout. So first let's create that, so we have that, because when we go to create, there's nothing here, right? So we're going to go to the sidebar. And where we have posts, we're going to create another child route. We're going to say create. And again, you just say plus page.svelte. Now we're going to close this. Let's give it a h1. Create new post. Let's give it a paragraph. Create a new post. We can save this. And now when we go to this route, now it's post create. Before we talk about dynamic routes, let me show you the real superpower of nested routes. And I already told you how SvelteKit knows what data to fetch for a particular route, but I want to show you how when one part of your app fails, it's not going to take the entire thing down. First, I'm going to create a file. You don't have to know about what it does right now. So I'm going to go to routes, posts, remember, to create, and I'm going to create a special file, so you don't have to be concerned what it does right now, but basically I just want to cause an error for the page. And when I create this file, I'm just going to use the SvelteKit extension, make this function. And now let's talk about unexpected and expected errors. So in SvelteKit, when you encounter an unexpected error, it can contain sensitive information, so the error message and stack trace is not exposed to the user. So let's really see what this is. So basically unexpected error, when you get a really bad error like this, it's like yikes. And then let me just go here and I'm going to say import type page load, just so it doesn't complain at us. So let me just save this, and you're going to notice something. So first our app crashed, but it basically took everything down, right? So that's really not great. It's not useful error message for a reason, because as I said, this is an unexpected error. So SvelteKit hides the error message and the stack trace, but you can see the logs for yourself. It doesn't hide that, but basically this is just to protect you. So what can we do? So for every route that you have, you can create a plus error.svelte file. So it's just going to get contained to that area. So if we go here to create, we can just say new file, we can say error. And now you already see something interesting. So if I say boom like this and go here, again, I'm going to go to posts, create, and it's just going to say boom here, and it's not going to take your entire app down. So for example, I can go here, let me just say yikes, and then maybe I can give it an emoji, I can say explosion, and then I can give it a description. Something went horribly wrong, but the blast radius has been contained to this route. And I'm also going to show you something fun. So we can say script here, and I can import a page store from app stores. And this is how you use this information in your error pages anyhow. So page store has some information. Here is some snippet I always use. So it's pre, and you can just use JSON stringify. So it's really just going to output an object of everything that's available. So we can use a store by saying $ page. You can see page has options like error message and etc. Let's really see what's inside this page. So if I do this, let me just zoom out so you can see what's going on. So you can see, yikes, something went horribly wrong. As you can see, here is the error message. You can see it's vague on purpose, even though we said here that it's yikes, right? So we can go here and we can see other params, route, and etc. And if you want to output this, really, you have an example in the SvelteKit docs. You can go here, and then you can say page, and then you can say message, error, message, or whatever else you have. You can even output the status if you want. But let's really talk about our expected errors, that is. And expected errors are created using the error helper, which sets the status and renders the error svelte component and returns the status and error message. So this is something that you import from SvelteKit, so we can just comment this out. I'm going to go here, and I can say throw error, and this should import this from SvelteKit. Now we can give it a status, and then let's say message. We can say yikes, and let me just give it an emoji, say speaker. So let's see when we save this. Okay, so now that it's expected, it's going to show the error message on the page. So this goes back to what I showed you on this last diagram, which when you're on the slug and if something goes wrong, instead of it taking your entire app down, this part is going to be down and you know where to look. So you know where to start looking for the errors. So let's talk about dynamic routes in SvelteKit. Let's say that you had a lot of posts and it would be really tedious to create a route with a slug for every post. So you'd have to create /post1 plus page svelte and then /post2 /page svelte, and it would get really tedious. So instead of doing that, you can create a route with dynamic parameters that uses square brackets around a variable name. So instead of being 1, 2, and etc. for every folder, we can basically just create this type of route where it's slug, and it's going to catch everything here. You can catch 1, 2, 3, 4, you can catch banana, or whatever else you might have. So let's see how we can create such a route. So I'm going to go to the sidebar, and here in routes, posts, we're going to create new file, but we're creating a folder. So you can say slug, and let's just say slash. Of course, we need the plus page file. So we can do it like this. And now this is going to match our slug. So inside of here, I can just say post, and then let's just log out the params. And remember how we have access to this great store from SvelteKit. So we can say import page from app stores. And I'm going to use a snippet here. And I'm just going to say page here. I'm going to save it. And now notice when we navigate to our posts, it's going to catch this param, which is 1. So it says params here slug, its name is 1. And then we have all other useful information. So if you go to 2, for example, it says 2. And of course, this data is the same, but now I hope some gears are turning in your head. And you can imagine how if we have access to this slug here, we can just pass it to a database or whatever function we have that calls some piece of data, so we can dynamically render content on the page. So right now, if you navigate to any post, the content is going to be the same, but later when we get to loading data, I'm going to show you how to use the dynamic parameter to show a post. Let's talk about more advanced routing in SvelteKit. First, let's talk about multiple route parameters. So what are multiple route parameters? You can use multiple parameters as long as they are separated by at least one character. So for example, let's say we have some image API. So this is going to be, I don't know, for example, image. And then maybe you want 200 by 200, whatever. And basically, how can we get this as parameters? So we can just put them again in square brackets. And we can create literally a route like that. And we can get the width and height and do whatever we need on the backend. So here in our project, this is starting to get unreadable. So I'm just going to collapse everything. And I'm going to go back to routes. And inside our routes, I'm just going to create a new file. I'm going to create an image folder, and that image folder is going to have a URL segment with X, we need a character, right? With height, and inside of it, since this is a folder, we need to create plus page svelte. So you can see here we created an image folder with height, which are going to be the params, and now we have access to them. So let me just close this. And again, I'm going to import the page from app stores. And I'm going to create a title, dimensions, and then let's just output it. So you can say page. So let me just save this. So let's really use this how I said. So we can go here, and of course you don't need these brackets in the URL. So let's say for example a user wants an image of the dimension 200 by 200. Now we can go to that route and we can see dimensions, and here are the params. So we get the width and height, and now you can do whatever you want with this. Next, let's talk about optional parameters. Let's say you're working on internationalization and you have a lang/about route with a required lang parameter. So for example, if I'm here, let's say I have English about, but I also want to match it by default that is just about, which isn't going to work. So let me just show you that. I'm going to go to the sidebar inside our routes. Let me just close everything here. I'm going to say new file. So I'm going to create a dynamic parameter lang. This is going to be about, and we're going to have page svelte. And let's just say about. So now when we go here, and for example, I'm going to say English, about is going to work. But for example, what if you want just this default about? It's going to say not found. So in this scenario, this is where optional parameters are useful. So to make a parameter optional, we can wrap the square brackets in another pair of square brackets. So if I go to the sidebar, here where lang is, I can say rename, and let's just add another pair of square brackets. I'm going to save this, and now when I go here and refresh, you can see that this matches. I want to note that this is a simplified example because you haven't learned about some things yet to make changing the language work, but at least you know about optional parameters in case you need it. Next, I want to talk about REST parameters. You might be familiar with REST from JavaScript, and that's the same idea for routes in SvelteKit. You might receive an unknown number of path segments in case which you can use a REST parameter, but be careful you do checks in your code because it could be anything. So let me just really show you the idea behind this. So here is a contrived example. Let's say we have some image API or whatever, and then we have media, and then we need path to file or whatever, and then maybe this is some image API so the user can give a width and height. But basically this is an unknown number of segments, right? So we can use a REST path, so we can say it like this. You can say file, and now we can catch what the user entered here and do checks that we need and do whatever we need after that. So let's see how we can do something like this. If I go here, and now in the source, again, routes, I'm going to create new file. So I'm going to create a media folder. I'm going to say slash. And now, since we don't know the number of segments in advance, we can just say file. This can be anything you want. This can be banana or whatever, right? So you can just say file, and then let's also say slash, and we're going to create another folder, of course. We're going to say width, and we're going to say height, because those are just parameters, right? And of course, we also need to say slash page.svelte. So this might really look complicated, but just give it a second to think about it. But yeah, we can just go here. So now we have media file, which is going to catch everything, and now we have width, height, and our page, which is going to be the page itself. So same as before, I'm going to import page from app stores. And now I can see here REST parameters. And now let's just output. So I can just output the page. So now, for example, the user navigates to media, and now they can say path to image, and I can also give dimension. So I can say 200 by 200. We should get a result. So you can see here it matches the params. So we get a file here, path to image. We get the width and height. How awesome is this? Lastly, let's talk about matching parameters. So if you go to the post route, for example, posts, and you can say /1, this is going to match it. But of course, it's going to match everything else like 1, 2, 3, 4, banana, and etc. But let's say we have something invalid like a space. This should never be a slug, right? So how can we make this more strict and make sure the route matches a valid slug? We can do this using matching parameters. And to do that, you just have to create a source/params folder, and you need to create a file that exports a match function. So let me show you quickly how you can do that. We can go here to source, and we can just create new file. So I'm going to create a params folder / and I'm going to create a slug.ts file, and I'm just going to say export const match. You can say param matcher, which is going to import the type. So we're going to say param. Let me just do this. And of course you need to spell this properly, so we can say export. And I'm just going to save this. So okay, now we need to return a boolean if this is true and false, which is going to involve some regex. But don't be afraid, because instead of using Stack Overflow or whatever, we can just ask our friend ChatGPT. So we can go to ChatGPT, which is my new best friend. So we can just give it a prompt here. For example, we can say, can you write a match function in JavaScript that just checks if the param is a slug, and it's going to say sure. And let's see what it's going to come up with. So yeah, basically almost we're there. I just want something simpler, right? And it can even show you how we can use the function, which is amusing. And just give it a second, so it just ends. And then we can regenerate it, and we're going to see a much simpler answer. So let me just go here, and I'm just going to ask a new answer, and let's see what it comes up with. So it says match param, and awesome, that's basically everything we needed. And we can just go here. We don't even need to copy the function, let's just copy the regex. So we can go here, we can say return, we can just use that regex, and then we can use test, and we can pass it the param. Alright, so while ChatGPT is doing its thing over here, let me just save this. Actually, before I save it, let me just go to 1. Alright, go here, and if I refresh it, everything works. So now if you give it something invalid, it should return a 404 because it doesn't match the route. But it's not working, and why is that? We have to do one more thing. So for example, if I go here, and then here in our routes, where we use the slug, so this is going to be in post slug, you have to say rename, and then you need to use the matcher. So we can say equals slug or whatever else matcher you have. Let me just save this, and now we get a 404 not found. Let me just see this is true. So we can go 1, 2, we can even pass it banana or right, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this should be valid. But for example, something like a space, that's not a valid slug, it should just say 404 not found. Alright, sweet, that's everything you need to know when it comes to routing in SvelteKit. There's more advanced things to go over like group layout, but first we need to learn about data loading in SvelteKit, which I'm excited about, so look out for the next part. Alright, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you want to support me, you can find the Patreon in the description. You can also join the Discord. So thank you for watching, and catch you in the next one. Peace!